Well, ladies and gentlemen, we are getting more early vote data. Some good news in Florida, some good news in Pennsylvania. Republicans, we saw the first few days in Pennsylvania, not the best. They've turned it around, and now they are cutting into the Democrats' firewall. But I will caution people when it comes to early voting, a lot of these numbers, they're going to change. Once we get to the final days of the early vote, like right before the election, that's when the numbers are really going to come into clear view. That's why people are saying if the numbers are so good, we might know that Trump probably is going to win the election even before election day. If you like the night before, you look at the early voting numbers, if it's so overwhelming, because we still would expect, unless something crazy happens, Republicans to turn out better than Democrats on election day. And if you don't have a big margin to make up, you take a look at this. This is something that I saw recently. This was from a few days ago. It is New York Times, Siena, giving their official prediction on just the early vote. So this is only the early vote, which obviously Harris is going to win. They've got her at 292 to Trump and Vance's 246. They've got her barely winning Georgia. This is just the early vote. Trump very likely to draw more day of vote in Georgia. So if it's a 1-point victory in terms of the early vote for Harris, it's basically a guaranteed Trump victory. They've got all the three Rust Belt states very close. They've got Trump winning the early vote in Arizona, barely losing it in Nevada, winning it in Texas, winning it in Florida, winning it in Ohio. So this would be very, very good if this turned out with these margins. You look at some of these margins, Texas Republican +4, you would also say day of should be pro-Republican, at least to a degree, probably leads to a 7-8 point win. Arizona Republican plus about 0.7, that's just the early vote. Ohio Republican +4, Florida Republican +4.5, Georgia Democrat barely by 0.8. North Carolina is probably going to be decided by the independents. Republican plus 0.2, that's very good, but that's a state that's probably going to be decided by a lot of voters that are not registered with either Republicans or Democrats. But the 2024 data was worse, but now it's 2 weeks ago. The early data in Pennsylvania was worse, but now it's better than 2020. And we knew it was going to be better than 2020 just because of the nature of 2024 versus 2020 and more Republicans voting early and less Democrats voting early. They were scared off with the pandemic in 2020. Now they're not. We've got this. Florida's total early mail-in vote is now Republicans plus almost 5. Yesterday morning, it was Dems plus 7. So yeah, there's going to be some big changes. Now they've actually counted 1.2 million early votes in Florida. They do it real early. And obviously this is just, party affiliation, but it gives you a good idea on who's winning this election. No party affiliation at 18%. Obviously that's going to make up a big amount, but still, this is what we're used to see. This is what we expected to see when it came to Florida. Even in the early vote, we knew that Republicans potentially had around, when you factor everything in, a 7 or an 8 point lead on Democrats just in terms of party registration. They were up by like 1.2 million or something like that the last time I checked, with the DeSantis stuff really influencing that state and making it not a swing state. There were some Democrats saying, well, it might be a swing state. It's just not going to happen. And so these numbers, listen, Republicans, they might end up holding a 3 or 4 point early vote lead going into election night, and then Trump expands it to like 9, 10, 11, something like that. You compare it to 2020, it's hard because just the demographics of Florida, the way it's shifted since 2020 is so crazy. That's why a lot of the polls in Florida are underestimating Trump, because they're basing it off of a +3 Republican environment when it's really about +7, +8 when you look at voter registration. And also Trump has done very well with independents or people not affiliated with the party in Florida in 2016 and 2020. If you look at the polls in 2016 and 2020, he was projected to lose Florida both of those years, and he won and really outperformed the polls. And now the polls say he's up by 7, and I think he's going to outperform them again because they're not understanding the shift that Florida has seen, and people don't realize that this is. You look at 2022, they just don't pay attention to it. I understand Democrats basically gave up those races, but it doesn't matter. There's not a state that a Democrat is going to win, or it'd be like shocking, especially a state that has the population that Florida does. If you look at the midterms and you lose the state by 20 points and 16 points and, in the governor's race, it's just, you're not going to win that state if you're a Democrat 2 years later. It's just ridiculous unless there's some crazy thing that happens where the Republican candidate is so horrible, which obviously is not happening with Trump. Trump's in a very strong position right now. His approval rating, we've got a new Gallup approval rating that's just crazy. You've got YouGov coming out and saying that Harris is up by 3. This is a general popular vote over Trump. Harris down by 1 since the last update. They have the generic ballot +3 Dem. That's not correct. It's not going to be a +3 Dem environment. If it was a +3 Dem environment and you have Harris +3, I could understand it. But the problem with this poll is the way they're polling the generic ballot. It's not going to be a +3 Dem environment. All of the top data says Republican +2, +3 environment. It's not, this is a significant deviation. It's not going to be a +3 Dem environment. I'm very confident it's not going to be that when you look at it. How about Lizzo charging the Harris Walz campaign $2.3 million for an appearance at a Detroit rally? That's great how they're spending their money. That Alex Soros money, I guess the George Soros money, is getting spent really well. Harris will head to Texas on Friday, will campaign with Allred. I would imagine this is mainly for fundraising purposes. She's going to Texas. And I know like liberals think, well, Allred can beat Cruz. It's not going to happen. It's a waste of time. They're going to be talking about the abortion policy. So I don't think Cruz is going to lose. I think Cruz crushed Allred in that debate, the Senate debate. And I think that's mainly for fundraising. People are saying, well, she's waving the white flag. I mean, obviously, they're not going to wave the white flag. You know, like they're still going to say they can win. They're putting millions of dollars into this campaign every day. They think they can snipe off a Senate race and also raise a bunch of money in Texas. I think that's probably what it is, honestly. This is the Gallup favorable, unfavorable, according to registered voters. This is another this is another death blow. It's crazy. Trump sitting +5 in terms of favorability. Harris at -5. I mean, nostalgia is a hell of a drug. A lot of people remember Trump, the 2018, 2019 economy, and they compare it to what's going on right now. And this is, it's crazy. It's just crazy how different, for example, I was looking at 538, and I never look at 538. Their model is proven liberal bias, heavy liberal bias, the way they weight their polls. It's all top liberal polls that worked horrible in 2016 and 2020. They all weight them at the top. So then, that's why Harris has been leading their model, and they had to finally switch it recently just because the polls were so overwhelming. And it's still like, oh, it's a toss-up. It's certainly, the election is certainly not a toss-up. If you factor every single data point in, you have to give Trump at least a 60% chance to win this election, or at least a 58. My God, if you factor everything in and you know how accurate the Gallup Party ID numbers have been, look at the approval rating. But the thing is, I was looking at 538 and looking at the approval rating. They've got Trump sitting -9. They have Harris basically even, or like -1. And it's just so crazy how different this is. This is literally a 10-point difference. Trump +5, Harris -5 in comparison to something like 538. And it just, I know they factor in a bunch of different polls and things like that, but there has been recent stuff where Harris is now coming back down in terms of her favorability. Remember, she was -14, -15 when she was a VP, which is very rare because there were certain points during the Harris-Biden, I guess Biden's still the president, but when it was actually a thing, that Harris had a worse approval rating than Biden, which is very, very rare, especially when you have when Biden's sitting -12, -13 in approval. They've tried to resurrect Harris and bring her approval rating up. She didn't do a single thing to bring it up other than just get a bunch of people, liberals, saying nice things about her. She goes from -15 to even. Okay, what'd she do? Did she walk on water? It's ridiculous. But now you're starting to see American people, they're not that stupid. Now she's going back down. Now she's -5. If this was true, man, these numbers are, it's hard to say that this is going to actually be if this was the result, Trump +5 in terms of approval rating in just the general popular, this is like a 3 or 4 point popular vote win for Trump. It's a total annihilation against Harris if these numbers are even close to accurate when you look at the approval rating. But this is not the only poll where I've seen Harris at a -5. I saw a poll where she was like -9 and Trump was -5. So there's been several polls now where, she's been in the negatives in terms of approval. You've got Harris going to Texas, Walz going to Kentucky. We reached the save down ballot races part of the campaign. Yeah, why is Walz going to Kentucky? Maybe it's for a fundraiser or something. We've got more intel here. Harris campaign privately flagging potential cracks in the blue wall. God, the blue wall, it's such an annoying saying. Concern centered on Michigan, 3 sources tell us. Campaign pushes back. It says they're going to win Michigan. Warning signs also in North Carolina. So that was the report that we got earlier. It was Michigan and North Carolina they were concerned about, which would be a serious problem. Quote, of all the 7 states, the one seems to be slipping a little bit is North Carolina. So they think North Carolina is potentially slipping away from them. You would have to figure Georgia would be even more right than North Carolina, or it would at least be around the same. That's a major problem, because if you lose North Carolina and Georgia, you're pigeonholing yourself into winning the 3 Rust Belts and going for broke there. But they're also saying Michigan's a problem now. So they're leaking oil everywhere, and it doesn't really surprise me. I thought this was interesting. British advisors to Kamala Harris hope to kill Musk's Twitter. So Britain, I don't know if you guys have read what's going on there. There was a big problem with immigrants a few months ago, and it's really really bad. And now I think Britain is really liberal, and they're taking a heavy stance where they want no free speech. And I mean, maybe they would just do something to X themselves, meaning like to Twitter, which is now X. They would do something to the site themselves to ban it or something. I don't think they really can do that right now though, because remember, a lot of these Western countries, they have this guise of like this modern liberalism is like this fake freedom, and they almost need certain events to happen to be able to do things, and then they'll say it's a reactionary move. It's like when they banned Trump. They wanted to ban Trump for years off of social media. They finally were able to do it with January 6th. They could use that as an excuse to ban him. January 6th was just a facilitator. It was just an assist. They just wanted him banned, and they found a reason. And there's other examples of that. But I've long said that if Harris gets in, my guess, and this is what they always do when they take rights away or they take free speech away or whatever, they already don't believe in free speech on the internet. But I think you're going to get something that happens. They're going to blame Twitter. They're going to say this misinformation, this disinformation caused American citizens to get hurt, caused someone to be killed or something like that. And then they're going to say we have to do something to where we get rid of Twitter, or we force Musk to sell it, or we put him in this legal hell. And there's no advertisers on X now, so Musk can't make any money. And we do it because we want to keep people safe. And that's how your rights are always taken away from you. It's always through the guise of safety, especially with these Western countries. It's always, they have to massage it almost into you. Like, look, we're going to take your rights away, but it's only because we want to keep you safe. It's very important. And you talk to any of these liberal people, and especially with Twitter, it's very obvious. They'll say that there needs to be regulation on Twitter. And it's almost like it's this weird game of tag where it's like, man, you want regulation, but only if your people can decide what gets said. That's the issue. That's the problem that we ran into in 2020 when they silenced the biggest story in October that potentially would have decided the election, but you killed it because it was going to hurt Biden. And see, that's a big problem. But with these people, it's the same exact thing. It's like, we need to make sure that there's no horrible things said on these platforms that could potentially result in real life crime or real life people with the disinformation and everything like that being injured. But it's like, okay, who decides that? Well, they want liberals to decide it. That's the big issue. So it's like this game of tug of war, and obviously they're very, very angry right now that Musk has control, especially during this election cycle. It's totally changed the game. But either way, guys, that is going to do it for this video. Make sure you follow me on X. Link to that's always in the description.